You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. And I'll share some of your views right away, and then we'll move to the next subjects that we have to discuss. Abbas Muhammad says, this teacher's arrears is really breeding corruption at the Controller and Accountant General. I was personally called to make an advance payment. Afterwards, the next month, my salary was paid in full. So these are the stories that I was trying to share with you earlier. And this also supposed to be a teacher. Seidu says that, Seidu Manduhu says that I was employed by GES in 2014. I was upgraded in 2015. I got only 3 months of the salary arrears owed me. I have failed arrear forms on countless occasions. I have been to Fair Wages and Salaries Commission in Accra. The attempt to get my salaries has proved futile. However, I had a connection man who was ready to work it out for me on condition that I will divide the amounts 50-50. I declined to this proposal. I'm hoping that the arrears will be paid as is being promised. It has been 4 years. Why? What's my crime? And there is this other teacher who has gotten in touch with Newsfile consistently for almost 3 years now when these issues come up to be discussed. Florence Ansong, and she says, Samson, I wonder if my name is captured at all. I tuned in late, but this is what I can say. Government owes me 4 years salary arrears from 2012 to 2016. So that's how crazy the situation really is. And these people are supposed to be working for the state, right? Okay. And we expect that we'll have a society that doesn't encourage corruption and corrupt conduct. Okay. Right, so let's move to the next issue that we have to discuss, and we want to say thank you very much to Kwamina Ahenkwa Kwashi, who is head of Salaries and Working Conditions Department of the Ghana National Association of Teachers. He has taken leave of us, and now joining us is Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante, Director, Advocacy and Policy Engagement at CDD Ghana. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you and good morning.
Okay, right. So my other guests, as you know, are Dennis Ajay Jumo. He's a lawyer. Dr. Kwame Asa Asante, Senior Lecturer, Department of Political Science, University of Ghana. And of course, the usual suspects, Abdul Malik Kubako. So we start with you. How should we interpret your findings to start with? We'll discuss that and dovetail it into the brouhaha about the new register that the EC is seeking to do, that the NDC and other parties are kicking against. Some are saying it should be aborted because this is another useless waste of resources. We should be focusing on the Ghana card and make it integrated so we can avoid this situation of every year or every election year wanting to make a new register. So how should we interpret it? And it's very worrying that 4 in 10 Ghanaians, are not taking sides. And by your findings, you said when asked which party's candidates people will vote for if presidential elections were held the following day, more than 4 in 10 Ghanaians, that's 42%, said they would not vote. For me, that's the biggest issue.
So let me correct that statistic. I think it's in the the way the statement was crafted, but if you look at the preceding statement, it talks about people not declaring a position. So the breakdown goes to, I think 11% say they will not vote at all. 19% said they will not reveal who they would vote for.
Okay.
And 12%.
In your key findings,
yes.
You had. Okay.
So that's 11%.
So it's rather the 11% who said they will not vote at all.
Yes.
Okay.
12% said they are undecided. All right. And then 19% said, I wouldn't tell you who I'll vote for. So they did not indicate a preference. But even the 11% is the highest we've had for a while. And so I think for me, there are two narratives that you can try to interrogate. One has to do with the incumbent, so the two main parties going into an election. And then the other one is basically more of a commentary of where our democracy is currently in terms of voter behavior, voter attitudes to multi-party democracy, and so on and so forth. I think we just run through the whole referendum debate, and one of the sort of driving factors for people who say they wouldn't want partisanship at local level was a certain fatigue with multi-party politics, which they feel has not delivered development, and therefore they felt that more of it was not something that would advance the course of development.
Your finding was that the proportion of Ghanaians who said they would not vote and who did not declare a voting intention is the highest recorded in Afrobarometer surveys going back to 2008.
That's right. And it's a big category. If you put those three categories together, I think the highest we've had in the past was about 27%. So if you put this together, that's 42. Even though, I have to have a note of caution here. When somebody says, I wouldn't tell you, it doesn't necessarily mean they don't necessarily have a preference.
Right.
Maybe at that point in time, they don't trust you, they don't want to, it's a secret vote, they don't want to tell you, and so on.
Culturally, they are averse to saying it.
Exactly. So there's always a percentage, and if you look over the years of Afrobarometer, there's always a percentage that will tell you they will not disclose. And so when you're looking at the numbers for NPP or NDC, you always have to remember that there's still a pot of voters who are yet to indicate one way or the other. And so the parties have to then figure out, and then that you have to do breakdowns and see what demographics is saying this. Are they the people who are likely to vote for me or not in the past? But the 11% is troubling. And even if you just do anecdotal, your family members or your friends, this is probably the first time that you hear people saying, oh, what's the point? I'm not planning to go and vote come the election. And actually, one of the categories where you hear a lot of this are young women who indicate this action. So what exactly is going on? For me, what is going on with our citizens and their attitudes to multi-party democratic elections and elections and participating elections? Are they feeling, disappointed that, well, they don't really, the politicians might come and say this, they don't really deliver. We have two-party system. If I don't like any of the parties, I don't really have a choice. And so what's the point? Maybe they will all deliver the same thing. So these are worrying trends, because why? If you look at what has happened in the Western world, the fallback from globalization and so on in the US and in the UK, you end up with Trump. So when you get to a point where people, and of course people have their own views about Trump, but the anti-establishment type of candidate, or the candidate who appears to be, might appeal to a future that you are not clear about, but you end up with something that you really did not plan for. And if we don't find ways to address these issues, you open a system for that. You know, and it's happening all out. It's not even just in Ghana. It's happening on the African continent in many places, where particularly because the demographic is also very youthful. You know, and they don't have the same kind of restraint, the same kind of patience to wait and hold on. So if at some point you get dissolution and you think somebody comes up and he sounds great, you know, he seems to be speaking the language and all of that stuff, before you know, you have a different kind of political arrangement or a different kind of leader that
this is September, October that you are speaking to the people.
Yeah.
Supposing that this is our reality, and I want to believe, just as when we're talking about the corruption survey results, that almost everybody on this table said that's really the reality, that we can say the same of this result. We have 1 year, or if you like, some 11 months to go to the elections. There can be a dramatic change in this. What will bring about that change?
What I'm talking about in terms of a Trumpian movement, I don't think you'll get it in 2020. So that's why I separated the issue. That for us, we see a trend in terms of Ghanaian general attitudes to multipartyism and democracy and development, which has to be resolved. Because then you open up the political system to things that you can't really, you know, you don't know. It's an unknown. But in terms of going into the 2020 election, and note that the Afrobarometer is not a poll, it's a survey.
Right.
And the interesting thing about it is that it really gives you a lot of information as to what might be driving these attitudes on this particular question. You have economic evaluations, you have social evaluations. So if you're a political party, you have enough data for you to know, you know, why are young people more likely to rate me this way or
what
that way.
What to do, how to couch your message going forward.
There's a lot of information that you have that for you to make a decision as to how should I even have my campaign so that I can respond to.
But it's a genuine concern that you might not get as voting once.
Yes.
And that's cost
exactly
to the
because
state.
if people you know, stay away. But you know, the cost might be even just in monetary terms, but there's a much more serious cost in terms of people, you know, basically withdrawing from the political system. And if the citizens don't have confidence, then even the legitimacy of who you elect becomes a problem. Anybody that is thrown into that kind of situation, your ability to govern
and the heightened tensions
is absolutely limited
when you're going into second round.
Yeah. So even when if you go through that and you become a government, having the public support to be able to deliver your agenda becomes a problem.
Okay.
So that, I think for me, is good. It's a year before election. It offers a lot of, all of us, good opportunity. But I want to think that even beyond 2020, we have to think seriously about how we make our politics deliver development.
Okay. And like the CDD continues to use the expression that democracy is not delivering the dividends to the people. Now, the bit about the Electoral Commission, you know, taking a decision that only biometrically registered electorates will vote in 2020, and these parties that are saying that you can't be bringing this up at this time, the NDC, supported by the PNC, and we are told the United Front Party, the Eagle Party, and the All People's Congress. You know, we have all sorts of parties in the books. Yeah.
Yes, so I know this particular matter has been discussed for quite a long time. I mean, it's not a current issue. When the Electoral Commission sort of came in, the new leadership, because they did an evaluation of the STL arrangements and so on and so forth. So I think even as at I think the early part of this year or so, there was an intention that they wanted to do a new register. The current problem is that at the last IPAC meeting, where they were presented with the rationale, why they wanted to do the technical things that they have done and so on, there was a request from the parties to see a report so that they can also satisfy themselves that there's really a need to do this. I understand that that did not happen, and then the next letter was for them to come and see the suppliers, proposed suppliers, who were going to deliver this particular technology, to evaluate them and so on and so forth. So I think there was a sense that they did not get an opportunity to really input into the process. Actually, if you look at the timetable, we are really in a very difficult fix. If we're going to do a new register, basically by January, we should be ready to go, because as you know, the registration process, exhibition and so on, and then you have to then move on to nomination and so on. If you are not doing this by first quarter or into May, June, then you are in trouble. So if you're going to use a new system, you have at most 5 months to be able to deliver it, which include testing it, piloting it, all of those kinds of issues have to come in. So I feel that the Electoral Commission is in a fix. And because you also have DLE to deliver, you probably have not been managed to focus on that, at the same time. Well, you have to
and DLE is district assembly elections.
District assembly elections. So so I think they have a timetable. They are trying to move quickly, but the voter registration process is so important, particularly if you are introducing a new technology that might have facial recognition and all kinds of other features. So I think IPAC still is the avenue for these kinds.
But what do you think what does your gut tell you and the experience says that 11 months to register 11 million voters, is that practicable, and to roll it out and use that process for the elections in 2020?
I wouldn't, for a question like that, I would definitely not rely on my gut. I would like to rely on some real technical information to know that it is feasible. We dispatch one of our IT people to try to sit in to, understand what is going to happen. But I think that whatever it is, it appears that the system that they have, the old system, was giving them massive problems. Even with the limited registration exercise, they had huge problems with some of the data records going missing and all kinds of things. So it looks like if you need to do a new system, but within the time frame, can it be done? I have to see the technical information to be able to say.
What's your IT people telling you?
Well, I mean, so this were basically to understand what the people were offering, both the hardware and the software. But whether or not in terms of, I think they were giving, both of them were giving 5 months to deliver, at least on the hardware.
All right.
You have to integrate hardware with software, all of those issues. I mean,
Kuku, if you don't mind, can we start from the bottom to the Afrobarometer? Well, is it not too late? Your colleague Benefsin, who is an expert in this area, says that it's too short a time. The Electoral Commission should abort this plan.
Well, when it comes to these things, he's more competent than I am. I mean, I hardly have any basis of challenging somebody like Benefsin relative to these things. But of course, I can express my own views.
Sure.
See, my understanding is that we're dealing with two things now. The need for a new, that is what the EC is putting forward, a new biometric, voter management system that is distinct from a new voters register, even though they are interrelated.
Are you able to explain that?
Yeah, they're talking of the equipment, the biometric equipment. What they have now is being obsolete. They use the word obsolete. I've seen a report that tries to justify it. Yesterday or so, I double-checked whether this report, which is a EC document, has been supplied to the political parties. Apparently, no. That could be part of the
This report is dated when?
This is 12 December 2019.
Okay.
12 December.
So at the time that they were meeting, it wasn't ready?
Well,
Yeah,
I asked.
IPAC, they gave them a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
But they wanted
all right,
the whatever.
I think this report should be made available to all the political stakeholders, not just the parties, but all this, because in these things they bring in all sorts of groups, even sometimes the donor community and things, and the CDD and all the rest go there. So this must be the basis for discussion, a serious interrogation of the issue. Do we indeed need a new biometric management system? From what I know, I think we do, because the old one is obsolete. And as Kojo was saying, even in terms of the limited registration, they have challenges. The online registration, they have serious challenges. The referendum that we had, there were also challenges. It's obvious. We don't have time. I would have read some of the points they made, but there appears to be some need for a new technology because the old one is outdated. Let the parties sit down together with other experts and interrogate this issue. Beyond that, the question will be whether this new system should be the basis to do a fresh register. I'm inclined to think if the two came together, it would be more acceptable. I'm inclined to think that there's the need for consistency. A new biometric voter management system should come along with a new voters register. Time frame then becomes the issue. Technically, I'm unable to answer that question, but I think we have many technically competent people who can resolve that matter. So before people like us can be invited to come in.
The concerns that they expressed, the NDC, including that they went to this meeting and the NPP was represented by, the Director General of the National Communications, Authority, and they don't understand that. Is that a point to make?
Look, it's not a substantive point. If I were the is it Anoche? Yes. If I were him, I would not have gone to.
I was wondering.
Yes. He's a party member, of course. That doesn't disqualify him from being appointed as chief executive of NCA. But if I were him or the party, I would not have asked him to represent the party. That's my own personal. But it doesn't violate anything.
I think that the party believes or feels that this is our best hand when it comes to technology. And we know how he was credited with the NPP's ability to, collate the results in record time, and make them known
but I think
in the 2016 elections.
I think the concern was that, and that's why I didn't attend the software demonstration, but the concern was that the system included using the telcos.
Right.
And because he was a regulator
of the telcos,
of the telcos, a system that they manage, if you are bringing the person to sitting for a party that was also competing, I think just on the face of it, as you were saying, the person didn't need to go there.
The fear that
the person
his organization could compromise the system in favor of his party.
Exactly. I mean,
listen. It doesn't have to take his presence, physical presence at a committee meeting, for him to do what you call the influence. If indeed there is any such thing, that's why I say it's not substantive for me. But if I were, I won't provide the basis for somebody to peddle suspicions.
Yes. But you seem to agree that it's problematic that he's the one representing the party there.
Not that I agree. I said if I were in the party, I would have said, look, don't give anybody ammo to peddle suspicions. Suspicions that perhaps have no foundation. But it's the nature of our politics. You provide that ammo, then people run with it, and they distorted the environment, polluted. And
we are speaking about the EC's also independence over time, and it has had to go to the court, and the court has to pronounce on it for Ari, Dr. Papakwesi Indom's, suits. Sometime last, is it 2012? Yeah.
No.
2016.
But you see, this was a demonstration, wasn't it?
They seem to suggest that this was a surprise. They didn't know anything about it, and the EC was not being, collaborative, was not, informing them ahead of time, even seeking their views before introducing things.
No, that I'm not sure the records show so. This letter I'm holding here was sent to all the parties, 25th November 2019, at an IPAC meeting. It's titled Emergency Inter-Party Advisory Committee, and I read a relevant paragraph. As a follow-up to discussions held at the emergency IPAC meeting on November 25th, 2019, the Electoral Commission will organize a meeting with political parties to further discuss the procurement of a new biometric tool set for elections in Ghana. Okay, this is date was 2nd December 2019, 3 p.m. IPAC room. Then there is this 4th December one. It says, as a follow-up to our discussions on the procurement of a biometric voter management solution for the Electoral Commission, you are kindly invited to a demonstration by a number of vendors shortlisted by the Electoral Commission. The demonstration will cover both the software and the hardware of the biometric voter management solution. This was the meeting that they boycotted. That was not exactly an IPAC meeting. It was a demonstration. For me, they could have sat in the demonstration, view it, then proceed subsequently to an IPAC meeting, especially if this report is given to them.
They seem to suggest that we must be part of the initiation decision.
Procurement.
You know,
the EC has a procurement.
The EC should not be seen to just be saying, yes, come and observe something we have done.
What is the procurement regulation relative to the EC? First of all, they have a procurement committee.
Right.
You know, the two major parties in Parliament is represented by the two parties because they are the only two there. It's even been so all the time when there were other parties. So in terms of procurement processes, I'm not sure anything has happened to lead to the cry of illegality or a violation. I don't think so. And at this stage, that is mere demonstration. Look, a big party like the NDC, it's been in government. It has capable people, both technically, politically, professionally. At this stage, I think their walkout was an overreaction.
Yeah, the contestation has been whether or not we should actually have a new system.
Yes.
So that has been the contestation.
Yes.
Okay. And so their problem with all these demonstrations that we feel that you know we don't have enough information.
Or you are being unilateral.
Exactly in your
decision. The question of unilateral, you know, decision making. And I suppose that is why, you know, long ago the NPP has suggested, as part of its recommendations for improving the system, that we should elevate IPAC into a legal instrument.
But they all met. If don't forget, this I think happened at that the committee was formed by the Farijan administration, but it continued during the Charlotte Osei administration. And I have their resolution here. All the parties signed on by the NDC and NPP said there was no need to give IPAC a legal status. It should remain as it is.
Because it can interfere with the EC's independence. Right?
Okay.
So you want to be careful about that. It's the same feeling I have about this.
So if they all agree in this manner, why is it that often, particularly when they are out of government,
that's what happens.
They seem to, you know, take a position that suggests that you are acting unilaterally, and that doesn't help us.
I think for me it's really an information gap. As I said, I really thought that even though a PowerPoint was done, they should have been given technical, because even based on the PowerPoint, there were very, very substantial issues they raised. So there's enough technical capacity on both sides to be able to assess whether or not this is true or the EC is exaggerating. And I think it's not too late to still make provision for that.
So like as you mentioned earlier, their bigger issue is that don't call us and tell us we want to do this. Are they not, you know, standing in the way of the EC's independence if they seek to suggest that the EC must, like, inform them from the start every little thing it has to do?
See, election management, yes, the law is very important, and an EC can always assert your independence. But at the end, you want a credible, peaceful outcome. That is the only thing that is going to, basically.
They are telling you that if we don't agree that there ought to be a new register, there shouldn't be one.
No, I mean, so it means it's even the personality of the leadership is important, because at the end, whatever technology you deploy is whether that voter understands what process is going on.
All right.
That is what is going to give legitimacy to the process. So you want the parties to be embracing of whatever system you are putting in place. Otherwise, they will go and misinform there are people that, oh, there's this crazy thing going on. And
all right, Kuku. So let's proceed to Afrobarometer. and the fact that there is some despondency, people don't want to vote, and that we might not get one-touch voting, going forward. But before that, I think it's instructive to read this. Godwin Eduji Tameklo says that, my regards to the panel members. On the register, my learned friend, Senior Kojo, should know that the abrogation of the Superlock contract is what is creating the problem with data migration during the recent limited registration exercise. The offline registration without the existence of STL didn't help. The cost of new biometric register cannot be justified. Migration of the current data to the new system should be considered. It is cost effective. We have used this register for the referendum and the Ayawaso by-election. We are going to use it for the 17th December District Assembly elections. On what basis do we want to invalidate the current register?
I think
thank you.
Kwaku's point about
Kwaku,
the two
let's go to Afrobarometer.
To be honest with you, I got a copy of the survey only yesterday.
Okay.
And but before then, of course, media shots have been out there. So I would want to hold my fire on it. But I believe election year, with this fever, could, change some of the dynamics. That's what I believe.
Okay.
But right now, I don't have much to say on it.
All right. Thank you very much. So, Dennis, the starting from that, biometric, system, almost all the time, the EC's independence comes under challenge from opposition party. The governing parties have always been comfortable with the EC. How should the EC proceed? Because it still needs these key stakeholders, particularly the NDC.
I think that based on history and also going through the case law and the dictum of the courts to the EC, although the EC have the power in terms of to come up with a new register in terms of demarcation of constituency, among other factors, although the EC is also independent, however, it exercises a discretion, and the law has given how the discretion should be done in terms of it has to be fair, it has to be candid, and as one key element that will ensure that the discretion is exercised critically is that the level of transparency. If there's always an element of suspicion amongst all these political, especially those in opposition, as to how the EC will go, you see the opposition NDC's party's position when Charlotte was removed and new coming in, and so the EC should have a posturing that seeks not to lead into the belief that they are seeking to do something untoward. Okay, so I would insist that there should be a high level of transparency in terms of going about these processes. As to what certain people, because of mischievous purpose, may say, they will still go about it because it may be a near to them politically. However, there should be an element of transparency how this whole exercise is going to be, so that the Ghanaian public, who has given the EC the mandate to conduct election for and on our behalf, will always side with the EC. But when the EC's posturing might not be right, or when information is very scanty, it allows for the propaganda element to come in. So I'll give you Kojo and Kwaku that there has to be a higher element of transparency, which will seek to affirm the EC's independence. But being independent does not automatically mean that they can decide to be unilateral, although the power resides with them. But over the years, there has been, through IPAC, there have been an instance where they seek to engage. And it becomes more fundamental when the issue resolves around what the Supreme Court have said in Abu Ramadan relating to the golden key that opens your political right, i.e., compiling a new register, and the register happens to be the fundamental. Through the election petition, the court have said that election is won at the polling station. Who is entitled to vote is determined at the polling station, and so if you have the foundation which will determine whether or not you win, being brought into, being brought up to it. So you have an instance where all the political parties, based on case law, based on the law, will be more particularly paying attention as who determines register, what goes into it. And so for where I sit, it is not strange that the opposition is opposing it. it happened, we'll let my vote count alliance. It's not strange. But to give the EC a higher pedestal is the level of transparency. Giving the Ghanaians the needs assessment to let us know that it is not being done on any mischievous level. These are the real facts that relate to it. How best can we, and especially in situations where some of us, because we are IT inclined, if you compromise the security of your IT system, somebody can sit in Afghanistan. Remember that the US election was influenced by Russia, for which they are seeking to go all this. If you compromise your security systems, where the data of your elections is in the hands of a foreigner, where there are security breaches, these are things that, for me, even beyond elections, it gives me cause for worry, because data, in terms of our current dispensation, data is actually the gold or the oil of our current dispensation. So if the EC does the needs assessment and realize that there are serious cybersecurity issues, there are serious issues concerning our data, our fingerprint, our biometric data, because if somebody gets your biometric data, he can get your bank account, he can get all these things. So if the needs assessment, as has been brought to the EC, relates to the biometric, and some of us might be, quote unquote, will not be willing to participate in elections, even if my biometric details can be taken away from me and can be used on towards. So I think that in all these exercises, we should, see how best we can push the transparency element. And something, if you allow me on the Afrobarometer issue that was raised, my major concern is not having a Trump as your president.
Because you were referring earlier to the Abu Ramadan Evans Nemako against the Electoral Commission, and it's become my favorite, and when the judgment came, you and I discussed earlier. This is what Georgina Wood said, and
fantastic
I repeat,
dictum,
I have read it like 2 times on this platform, but I keep asking myself, why can't we get this very simple logic? She said, she was presiding over that matter. She said that the need for a credible and reliable multi-purpose national identification system comprising the relevant data and communication infrastructure that would answer to most of our national needs, whether for electoral planning or developmental or other purposes, is greater than ever before. We think the time has come for the appropriate authorities to respond to this need. This is Georgina Wood speaking, to conclude that particular judgment.
Yeah.
We have how many, ID cards and, identification systems littered all over the place. Yeah. We have now begun a national ID, which is supposed to be this thing and answer this question. Why are we not seeking to perfect that? And all the time we want to spend money to do a new thing when it will not be used for too long.
So it's sad that we as a country allow these things to fester. I quite remember when they started the national identification and this form, Professor Teva was given that mandate, there was a stakeholder engagement where the Ministry of the Immigration, Passport Office, almost all these people met and they agreed that they have to pursue the national identification, for which reason, if we are able to undertake it, then we'll satisfy the prophecy of Georgina Wood as she then was before she left. Now, the problem you're having is that with the national identification in this country, we have not have a sustainable engagement in trying to have a follow-up on what is happening. Once the thing leaves Accra, quote unquote, all of us as a country, sadly, forget about it till there's an issue that relates to it. And that's why that's why some of us have said on this show that Ghana gradually have developed an Accra mentality. If the thing is not in Accra, all of us are, go country. So I think that as part of the whole process, it's ongoing. How best can we get the political parties and everybody to rally around it so that we can ensure that they give us constant report as to what is happening. The only time national identification will come to this table is when there has been an issue relating to it. And that's the sad aspect of we not being proactive but being reactive. I know the exercise is ongoing. However, all of us have forgotten about it, waiting that something will happen and then we might come back. But I think that when the national identification is able to resolve, and the timelines are also very important. I know for a fact that there have been delays or systemic challenges. If they are able to achieve it at a point in time, they can easily relate with the EC for it to be addressed. Because almost all the people who are being registered under national identification are above the 18-year-old threshold. So it will be easier for us to get that data, and EC did not incur any further cost on it.
Okay.
Can I?
Yeah.
Just before you go on the Afrobarometer, just two things. So the other thing we have to contend with is that there's a census that's going to be carried on. I think the first 2 quarters of next year, and often the census becomes your reference point for compiling a register. So that's another thing. What the timeline for the census is what we have to do on the ID, and then on the ID side, it's just to remind everybody that no technology can help you deal with underage voting and foreigners, which is one of the big problems that we have, or dead people. So whatever technology you deploy, a lot of your bloating in the register has to do with some of these things.
But that's
so
why the law,
and that's why
the law provides for continuous registration.
Yes.
So you have a system already in place. Everybody is hooked on. If they want to vote, they just use for voting. And those who are coming up, you just do continuous registration for them.
But if you want to delete,
like
if you want to delete people who are dead, that's why the ID system. What I'm saying is that
people can be done, only that we are not complying with the law. Before you bury everybody in this country, the law requires you to go for a barrier permit.
Yes, but you see, you need a system that makes it easy for the EC to have a list of death certificates and say, these people, I'm clearing them off. That is the ID system has to deal with that, because that allows all these agencies to integrate births and deaths and so on and so forth. So you have a clean way of just cleaning the system.
Yes.
That is not going to be fixed by facial recognition and all of those things. So the sooner the ID system or process comes in, the better for us to get a much more credible register.
So finish on the
Afrobarometer. But my major concern, in terms of the political legitimacy and the concern of people, he was talking about we having a Trumpian moment. For some of us, that's democracy. If we decide as a country that at a point in time in our life we want somebody with the character and temperament of Trump or Boris Johnson to lead us, so be it, so long as it's done within the confines of the Constitution. My major worry, and it will dovetail into our further discussion, when there is this general lack of interest in the democracy, which allows certain people to overthrow the government and then say that the people are not interested, and one day somebody says that based on the Afrobarometer report, it clearly demonstrates that the people have lost hope in the system, and on that basis, it justifies us overthrowing the Constitution to restore the new order. That for me is a major worry, and I think that is where we need to have the discussion. As in getting a Trump or getting quote-unquote anybody that you think might not satisfy in terms of your objective standard, it's not an issue. But the bigger issue is
for me, but I understand your point. Because maybe I have a certain value system or whatever.
I know, but it's even happening now, where you look at a certain MP, you think that, this MP should not be your blender, but he is actually your blender.
Yes, because that's a democracy.
That's a democracy that we are having. But the major concern is where people use as a legitimacy to overthrow the system. The other point I want to make is that in terms of determining who becomes the president of the country, is determined by the total number of valid vote cast. So even if 42% of Ghanaians say, quote unquote, we are not going to vote,
or we are not decided,
we have not decided, or we are not interested, at any point in time, even if it's 100 people who voted in the election, if the person gets 50 plus 1, the person becomes your president. That is different from how the referendum clauses have been fashioned out, which requires the total number of valid total number of people who have registered in the system. So that's why I wanted to make the distinction. And in terms of the report, it might send a wrong signal that, okay, people are not interested, it might go for a runoff. However, if those who decide to vote on that day happen to even be 10%, and a political party decides to get 50 plus 1, it matters not that 90% of Ghanaians decided not to vote.
No, but that's part of the discussion, that it doesn't appear any of the two will get the one-touch victory by the number of votes required.
No, agreed. But I'm just saying that even if we decide to go to at a point in time, I concede the fact that when we get to the election year, activities, and this whole election is also sometimes become cultural. There are instances where some of us are coming from. You have an instance where people will be calling you. You might decide not to vote, but the societal pressure that will bring to bear on you to go and vote that day is even massive.
That's true. Okay. So I don't know what you make of the biometric system introduction. So let's find out what you think about the biometric system introduction and all the brouhaha about it from the EC's own reports on the acquisition of the new voter management system. They say that the Commission has since 2012, the 2012 elections, been using biometric technology to create a more credible voter register and for verification of voters on voting day. What they are seeking to get is increase the credibility of the Ghanaian electoral system by engendering trust in the electoral process, reducing electoral fraud, reducing voter impersonation, and reducing multiple voting. They say that the current system has challenges, and the challenges include what they say is that the previous STL in their report, June 2018, suggests that other biometric and IT consultants and information gathered from daily operations and running of the last referendum in 2018 and limited registration and exhibition exercise in 2019 show challenges. Server, storage, networking hardware at the data center on which the biometric verification machines applications run are all obsolete and have reached end of use and end of support, end of use and end of support. They give several other reasons why it should not be relied on, and then come to this point that if you use the new system, we'll have a hardware vendor agnostic software solution that will run on commercial of the shelf device, preventing vendor lock-in. But among other things, they say fraud will be eliminated, and you know, all the problems you seem to have with your current system will be dealt with.
That's a good one. If you look at what you have said, all that they want is a credible register. But because if you're talking about free and fair elections, you need a credible register that will be able to be accepted by everybody. So this effort by EC is a good one. My worry is that once you have brought on board the IPAC, you should be able to let them sit down and you discuss this issue. It doesn't cost anything sitting down with IPAC where the parties are in there and you discuss all these merits.
You are constitutionally independent. If the IPAC does not agree, what should you do?
Yeah, but then why
did
you create that body? You knew from the word go that yes, you are an independent body, you have what it takes to do whatever. But here you are, you created that system. If you don't want that system, kick it out. Okay, but once you want it, you have to be able to accommodate it.
That's my question to you.
Yeah.
If that IPAC cannot agree, and you are constitutionally independent, you are not subject to anybody's directions.
Yes.
What should you do?
They operate. The Electoral Commission operates on 3 principles. If you remember, IPAC is an advisory body. If you give an advice to the EC and the EC finds out, look, this thing is going to cost me, and for that reason, I'm not going to have the money, you can drop it. Another point is that they can also look at things that are practical. If what you are saying is not practical, is not feasible, I'm afraid it's an advice. It will be thrown into the lake of fire. And then the other third one is that they always want to go along with the law. These are the three principles that guide the operation of EC. And all to ensure that the register is clean, transparent, and all that. My worry is that once you've created this body, you should be able to let them sit down with them and then talk about issues that will all lead us to where we want to be. And for me, that is what is missing.
You haven't answered my question. If they don't agree, and they often don't agree.
Yeah, if they don't agree, then you push the EC to the wall, the EC will go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, because they operate on these three principles. And if they open their doors for discussion and you are not ready to accept this, then you hit the dead end. EC will go ahead. Yes. When you look at all this thing, you can also give some credit to the political parties. For instance, NDC. I had a conversation with their IT specialists and all that they went for the meeting, as Kweju has already said, and that they were just surprised by the exercise that was going to take place, because earlier on that was not the discussion. They wanted to have a full discussion on the matter so that they can also make input.
Kweju just showed you letters here that suggest that you shouldn't be saying that you are surprised, because the agenda was known.
That is what they were saying. They said there were some instances where even some minutes that they wanted to see and read so that they could continue the discussion for the day, they were not served without. All that I'm saying that is one driving force behind any election is transparency. So if somebody feels that, look, there is information you are hiding from me, from the word go, you poison the mind of people with regard to what the exercise you are doing. Remember, all of them also want the good for this country. So I don't see the point you are at each other's throat. That should not come in. Right. Having said this, I think I will touch on the Afrobarometer report. The figure that CDD brought out, when you sum all those who don't want to vote, those who don't want to declare for now, and all that 42, it's a very worrying situation. Because if you have a democracy young as we have, even though we've gone through about 7 elections, consolidating it, these are some of the worrying signs. Because then, if people feel that democracy is not yielding the dividends that we want, then you are likely to encounter what they call democratic reversals, where people believe that the old order that we have changed, we should go back, which you have already alluded to. But that is, we are likely to pay a heavy price for such an enterprise. So at this point, you realize that we need to do a lot of things in order to fix it. Because one other important thing that we cannot lose sight on is the fact that cost is very, very, very important. And the cost can be anything. Legitimacy, yes, you don't have most people saying that we support you, put you into office, then it becomes difficult to what govern and leads you to what governance crisis. And once you get into governance crisis, then people believe that democracy has not become the only game in town. It's something else. All right. But my hope is that it's too early, even though it's a useful, information for those in government and those in opposition, because this one is free of charge. Yeah. You have to go out there and do this survey and come and use it for your own benefit. Somebody has done it. Grab it, sit down, put politics aside, and then interrogate the issues and put it into planning. For me, that is a better way, because what we are having, if the situation remains, what it means is that you are going, all things being good, we are going for election where nobody will have a first round victory. And once you come there, remember anytime we go for a second round, there is a need for us to call for what? Funding and all that. Professor Jimabwedi wrote an article, a beautiful one. We rely on donors and all that for elections. He said the cost of doing nothing. If you don't support yourself, and all the time when you get into such situation, you rely on donors and all that, the day they will hold you to ransom, you are in constitutional crisis. And this is something we want to avoid at this time. But I believe that from now up to 2020, a lot of things are going to be brought on bear, and that will change the dynamics. One, we are going to see the running mate coming out from each of the parties, and that will also inform people as to the direction they want to take.
Nanado's running mate is known.
Yeah, but NDC one has not come out. All right. So then 2, we are talking about also the manifestos, which is major policies of would-be government or governments. And these people want to look, interrogate.
Do people really vote on the back of manifestos?
Yes, but it's needed. Whether it's the guide, a good guide for governance.
All right.
If you don't have it, there is no way you can gauge the conduct of every government. Right. So we need it. And remember, out of this, messages are born.
Right.
Messages that will really influence the choices of voters.
One district, one factory.
We need other. But recent research has shown that if you really want to hit the first round, you should be doing, NDC for instance must be doing 48.9% on the average for all the regions. Then they are getting closer. Then NPP must hit about 46.5%. Other opposition parties about 4.47%. Remember, spoiled ballot is now an important variable in this type of equation, which we cannot lose sight on. So although we are saying that this worrying signal, we are likely to work against it.
All right. Okay. Kwaku, you were putting your hand up.
Well,
Just a minute.
I was saying that this tug of war, as it were, over whether we need a new register or not, even the biometric, introduction of biometric. It's always like that.
Right.
At the end of the day, we are able to resolve the matters. When the NPP was asking for a new register, talking about this Togo and all that, the EC couldn't do it. So Abu went to the court for a clean-up rather than an entirely new one. So at the end of the day, if there's any party that is against what the EC wants to do, I think they know the way to the courts.
Okay. Now, I'll read this briefly and then we take a break and return to deal with our last issue. Because the EC has not actually given a full-blown explanation to everybody to know what is going on, let's take advantage and do this. It says that it proves to be very useful in cases of electoral fraud related to identity theft, in cases where it is impossible to authenticate the voter, or when statistics on persons registered to vote have been artificially inflated due to the introduction of fictitious voters. The appropriate and meaningful use of this technology goes a long way to ensure the fairness of the ballot. The acceptance of its use by the Ghanaian voting public is dependent on how well it is able to correctly identify people and also correctly eliminate voter fraud. The quality of the voters register plays an overriding role in this decision. An obsolete, incomplete voters register cannot be used as an adequate basis for an electoral or referendum process to ensure the principle of one man, one vote. In our tense political climate, where there is a total lack of trust between the different parties involved in the electoral process, biometrics can itself become something of a double-edged sword. It may help to resolve problems with the identification of voters and prevent fraud of a certain type, but it cannot by itself render an electoral process reliable, credible, and transparent. This IT system that support this biometric system must be modern, secure, reliable, and have the necessary performance to meet tight electoral timetables and demanding service requirements. The current system in place simply cannot meet the requirement to support the 2020 general election and beyond. It is therefore not a question of whether the system should be changed. It is a question of when and the time is now. I think you should note the very last portion. The current system in place simply cannot meet the requirement to support the 2020 general election and beyond. It is therefore not a question of whether the system should be changed. It is a question of when, and the time is now. All right, thank you very much. We take a break. When we return, we ask questions about the scars of the revolution. Be right back.